Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack. Welcome back to Right Pack Radio. This is your host, David Allen Lucas, author of science fiction, crime drama, and other craziness. Also president of St. Louis Writers Guild. With me today is...
co-host Kathleen Kayembe, paranormal romance author under the pen name Kaseka and Vita, and all-around weirdo.
Brad R. Cook. I write steampunk, so I guess that makes me a weirdo, too. I also write all kinds of other fun stuff, usually for kids, sometimes for historical crap, and then sometimes for business stuff. It's fun. Find out more at bradrcook.com. Wasn't that a great sell?
That was a great sell. Way to go. You didn't talk about Iron Horseman. Or Zulu.
Oh, good point. Okay, fine. So as I said, I'm an author of steampunk. One is Iron Horseman. It's out now. And the other one is Iron Zulu. It can be found November of this year, and you can pre-order it right now.
Fedora Amos. I write Victorian whodunits like Jack the Ripper in St. Louis. And I have a book coming out next February. I finally got a publication date for Mayhem at Buffalo Bill's Wild West.
Excellent.
5-star. Also, I'm president of Greater St. Louis Sisters in Crime.
I'm Melanie Claney, author of science fiction, fantasy, and nonfiction.
Okay, and today we're going to explore 22 lessons from Stephen King on how to be a great writer. Now, I'm going to start off with saying this. Everybody's going to go boo at me. I don't care. No, I'm not. I know. I'm not a fan of Stephen King. However, I recognize his greatness, and when he talks about writing about, or talks about what you need to do as a writer, I sit down, I shut my mouth, and I listen. So with that said...
Oh, and I think these rules are based on his book about writing, Stephen King.
On Writing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's a good book. It's
yeah,
and they were adapted and condensed and adumbrated, whatever you want to call it, by Maggie Zhang.
Yes.
Yes. So we're going to talk about both as we go through this. Number one, Brad, if you would.
I'll take it. All right, stop watching television. Instead, read as much as possible.
And you might think that that's so you have some time, because everyone knows television's a big time waster. And sure it is. If you don't turn the television on, you are going to have more time for writing or for whatever else you do in your life. But the main reason that he gives is because it clamps right down on your creativity. What do you think about that?
I disagree.
Okay, go for it. Why?
Okay, well, for one, let me start with the general proviso that it can clamp down on your creativity, but it can also be both a jumping off point and two, especially if you're writing contemporary fiction, a whole lot of contemporary world is expressed there. There's all sorts of allusions that I read in books that are recently written set in the modern day. There's all sorts of allusions to it, and frankly, how do you get pop culture if you're not exposed to pop culture?
Okay, I'm going to agree with him and disagree with him on one aspect. I'll do the disagreement first. Mm-hmm. The one thing, and this really you don't need television. Radio dramas work just as well. Best way to catch dialogue that I've learned, and I'm stealing actually from Gene Roddenberry, is you turn on the TV, you turn your back around, and you listen. And you listen to the way people are talking. Now, yes, you could do that in real life. Just go to a coffee shop, listen to people talk. But you know what?
They don't talk like Arthur Miller. Come on.
Right. They
just say things, you know?
Right. They just talk. They don't
have dialogue that people want to hear.
Exactly. Dialogue is more than just people talking. And that's actually a topic for another time. But it's to convey information that goes with the story. Now, where I am going to agree with him is we're visual memory. A lot of us have visual memories, but we're visually memoried animals. I didn't quite say that way I really wanted to, but that conveys the thing. Once we've seen it, it's kind of stuck in your head. And irregardless of how much you play with it, it still becomes the model, if you will, of how it is.
Depends on the person.
Okay, I think with TV, it's like books. Pick the good ones. Pick the good shows. Now, if you're okay, I'm going to get myself in trouble. If you're watching reality TV, guys, no. Go ahead and then you.
Well, here's what King says. If you want to be a writer, you must do two things above all others. Read a lot and write a lot.
Amen.
And I would
Read
agree
a
with that.
lot.
Now, however, I do have to throw this out that I often will get ideas out of TV. So I will watch I've said this before, that the giant climax to the trilogy that is the Iron Chronicles of what I'm writing, the beautiful bow came from watching History Channel late night while I was writing one night. So on some level I have to say that yes, I have used TV, but I can see what Stephen's saying, because we all live in the written word. And so if you immerse yourself in the written word, it's going to help you out. However, I will say, cut out all the distractions during your writing and editing time.
Most certainly. Go
And
ahead,
that
and
can
then
be TV.
I'm going to come back up. Go ahead.
I'd like to bring up a point about who Stephen King wrote On Writing For. It's primarily aimed at fiction writers. So I think it is good to watch less TV as a fiction writer. There are some things that you can learn from TV, like there are a lot of programs that'll teach you things on TV that are great and I think should be watched. There are programs that will like blow your mind, series that are great. I think it's more important to watch TV with intentionality than to let it become a mindless thing.
And that's going with what I said a second ago about
Same-
picking your shows.
Yes.
Go for it.
And I think it's the same with books often enough. But just, I think the point is to be intentional and in what you're taking in, and also to recognize that, this isn't the same rule as a screenwriter would need. Screenwriters, if you're writing for TV, you need to be able to watch things. This rule is not for you.
Yes.
You just took that right out of my mouth. Thank you.
Yeah, so just understand that his rules, that On Writing as a book was primarily aimed at fiction writers, people who want to
Novelists, short
Yes.
story writers. Yeah.
Yes, people who want to be like Stephen King in the output and in, the level of diversity and creativity, these rules are for them. So if that is not you as a writer, take them with a grain of salt, appreciate what they're about, but recognize that these may not apply to you.
And let's not forget the main point. Read, and read outside your comfort zone. too.
Exactly. Two things I'm going to add to this. One is to agree with what Kathleen was saying as before. She took some of the words right out of my mouth. There's an old adage from computer programming: junk in, junk out. If you're watching junk, that's all you're going to put out. Is more than likely is put out junk. But with that said, look at the Hunger Games. Hunger Games was based on the author channel surfing between watching reality TV, game shows, and CNN's coverage of one of the Iraq wars. And those two more or less combined, and out came this idea of Hunger Games. So sometimes it does, as Brad said, have its influences are good, but yeah. Go ahead. Number 2.
All right, number 2. Prepare for more failure and criticism than you think you can deal with. God, is that true?
Oh, God, yeah.
And those,
There will be
bad
plenty of
reviews.
opportunity for self-doubt. That's what King says.
yeah. You can't disagree with that. I don't think any
Some
of us
people
would.
have a failure board. For instance, put all your rejection letters, or now get your emails and print them out and put them up on the board. That's your goal. Get 10 rejection letters per week.
And cherish your
Yes.
good failure.
Yeah, I was going to say it. Go for it.
Didn't
Kathleen.
King
King had
rejection.
I think at one point King had a nail that he hammered
Railroad
to the wall.
spike.
Railroad spike. And he would just stick the rejection letters on there and watch them pile up and up away from the wall. But, rites of passage, man.
I think it's true of any artistic kind of profession, whether it's music or art, visual arts, you name it. We all have to have that thick skin. We may not be born with it, but we better grow one.
Yes.
Well, and I'm going to toss out on my own personal, and we've talked about it a little bit on Right Pack Radio, which I've only blurped it out there. But about 9 years ago, I started having success in this writing industry, and then I kind of had to go like a turtle into a shell because I started taking care of an elderly parent. Between that and my regular pay job, there was no time to write. I still wrote when I could. But talk about failure. Talk about having to fight against it on a constant basis. I wasn't getting criticism from other writers. I wasn't getting criticism and rejection so much from the editors. I was dealing with, in my case, a parent who thought writing was frivolous, family who thinks writing is frivolous, even though we've got a lot of writers in that family, and personal life just kicking me into you-know-whats constantly. Go ahead.
I think what Brad read that King said, there's plenty of opportunity for self-doubt, is good to remember. And also something King says is if you write or paint or dance or sculpt or sing, I suppose, someone will try to make you feel lousy about it. That's all.
That's true.
And, you know, it's hard when you're not able to do what you love, and it's hard when you're getting opposition from outside of yourself. The really dangerous part is when those oppositional voices outside start echoing in your head. And that, more than anything, is what made it hard for me to write for a while.
Yeah.
Like those, kind of having internalized those voices that then made being creative, which is what I think I was made to do, like it's what I'm happiest doing, that then made it hard to just do simple things.
And sometimes, I'm going to let you go, but sometimes you got to deprogram yourself from that as you're going. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then there's, you have to learn to recognize constructive criticism, and you learn to take criticism constructively. So, for instance, all those rejection letters, some of them you need to ignore, but some of them actually might have some good advice in them, and you need to be able to figure out the difference.
Oh, if you get a rejection letter that has advice in it, pay
Treasure
attention.
it.
Because often rejection letters are just form. I got an amazing rejection letter that just turned the entire story that I had sent on its head. I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what it was. And the editor was just like, think about these things. And I was like, oh my gosh, the angels are singing and the light has dawned. So, you know.
So that's what that sound was.
It was. Yes, it was. Melanie's point about constructive criticism and taking that constructively is really good. I also want to add not to take things personally. A lot of rejections will come because it's a problem of fit. It's nothing against you as a writer. You are not what you submitted. You're an awesome person, whoever you are. Keep doing what you're doing. But whatever you sent in to whatever venue you sent it to just didn't mesh. Either it wasn't what they were looking for, they had too much of it, or it wasn't right for them in some important enough way that they rejected it. There's a place for what you write, though, so keep submitting it. If eventually it will get accepted, it'll find the place it was supposed to be in, the place where it fits.
Or it will transform into different stories. Go ahead.
Just recognize it's not personal. It's just fit.
I was going to say I teach a workshop on querying and pitching. Just did it. And that's actually the entire point of my workshop. When we get to the end, the entirety of the whole reason I've just been talking is to inform everybody that rejection is never about the author. It is always about the work. I have never heard of anyone being completely rejected outright because of who they are. It's always the work that gets rejected. It's important to remember.
There are always going to be trolls out there, but that's not...
Trolls are different.
They're different. And it's good to recognize when it's someone, when a rejection comes because it's fit, which is, like 99.9% of the time. And when it's somebody just, being a troll and having a bad day. Don't listen to those people, ever. Whether they're critiquing your work or what,
Number 3.
All right. Don't waste time trying to please people. On this, King says, if you disapprove, I can only shrug my shoulders. It's what I have.
Agreed. I don't think... go ahead.
Again, you have to be able to separate that from constructive criticism. Because there's the people that think writing is frivolous criticism that you can just, reject wholesale. And then there's the, well, what do you think about changing the way this works?
Oh, I was going to ask you to read a little bit further up.
Yeah, I was about to read that one, the other one too.
Yeah.
I just like the first one, or the second one first.
So please do.
All right. He also writes, if you intend to write as truthfully as you can, your days as a member of polite society are numbered anyway, he writes. Much like the Mark Twain philosophy on writing.
Very much so.
Wait, what was the Mark Twain philosophy on writing?
Just stir up as much crap as you can.
Sounds
That's not really Mark Twain, that's a total paraphrase, but I'm sure he would have approved.
You probably would hand you a cigar after that one.
The sentiment sounds like Twain.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And also, too, let me just toss out there with this. It's a sidebar to the pleasing other people. A lot of people chase trends, genres.
Yes, I think that is what he meant. You are trying to please your reader. You're
Yes.
trying to connect with them.
Yeah.
So them you want to please, I think.
You can't please everybody, and don't
Right,
bother
right.
chasing a trend. Go ahead.
I think this connects to the rule that is next. Can
Yes,
we
I
do
think
these
so.
in conjunction?
Sure.
Like discuss them together?
Yeah, so number 4 is write primarily for yourself.
Amen to that.
King says on this, I did it for pure joy of the thing, and if you can do it for joy, you can do it forever.
So I thought these two rules, don't write to please other people and write primarily for yourself, are, extensions of the same rule. If you're writing for other people, you're not being as honest, I think. And honesty is necessary when you're writing.
It's actually, I'm going to say Neil Gaiman, and I've talked about this in a previous episode somewhere. Neil Gaiman gave a commencement speech, 2012, I think. Don't hold me to the year, but it's definitely in the 2000s. He's talking to the graduates about how his goal basically is a mountain. He did stuff he would write for money rather than what he wanted. And to borrow his line, he very rarely enjoyed it, very rarely got the money, and very rarely saw whatever it is he wrote published. But when he was writing for something he wanted it to do, there you go.
There's no substitute for passion.
There isn't. Okay.
Welcome,
Welcome, Jen.
Jennifer.
Hi, yeah. I'm sorry I'm late today. I was actually putting on an art show,
Yay!
and it went a little over. I thought for certain I'd make it here on time, but
Hey.
hey, I want people to walk into my art show. That's just kind of how it works out. So,
Exactly. How else?
special thanks to the AKC Museum of the Dog for hosting me and Dog Park and all that at their facility today.
Yay.
Hooray!
Okay.
Number
Next one.
5?
Number 5.
All right. Tackle the things that are hardest to write. And on this, King says, the most important things are the hardest things to say. They are the things you get ashamed of because words diminish your feelings. As he says, writing is refined thinking. And then I love this part, so I'm adding it too.
Go for it.
Stories are found things, like fossils in the ground. Stories are relics, part of the undiscovered, pre-existing world. Ooh.
They are in an undiscovered country.
Oh, Captain, my captain.
I think a lot of people take his stories just kind of at face value for horror. And yes, you certainly can do that. But he also has some important issues that he discusses. Look at Thinner. Look at Christine, for example. One's love for something that is inanimate is blown so far out of proportion it's almost unrecognizable. And yet, I think we all fall victim to that kind of idol worship of something from time to time.
I name all my cars.
Well, I do too. I mean, it's kind of a natural thing. But I'm not in love with it the way he was in love with Christine,
No.
that could bring it to life, for goodness sake. So I think that there are important themes there. They are just artfully covered.
Right. And it kind of goes back to the episode we actually just put up today. As the audience knows, we record and then we put this up a couple weeks later. But the one that just went up today is writing about ethical issues. He definitely includes the ethical issues. They are important to be introduced, but he doesn't come out and hold it like a fish and slap you in the face with it.
Yes, like clowns.
I think some of the hardest things to
Well, this is
write,
it. Then that's a clown.
the reasons your thinking needs to be refined is because they are touchy subjects, issues that will make people uncomfortable and that make you uncomfortable for that same reason. And I think Rule 4, writing for yourself, and Rule 3, don't waste time trying to please people, come into play too there. Because tackling hard things requires a level of honesty. Again, honesty, being how you connect with people and how you make them feel attached to what you're writing. Hard topics require a level of honesty that not everyone's going to want.
And, for example, an inordinate love of pets in Pet Cemetery.
Yep.
That is iconoclastic. It attacks some people's very basic beliefs about our relationship to animals. It does. You know, you got to go about it obliquely or not at all.
Well, I think writing about tough subjects, especially subjects that are a part of you, can be actually the hardest thing you'll ever have to do. As Hemingway said, you just have to go to the typewriter and bleed. That's easy to say. It's really hard to do. It's even harder to come through. I have a book it's actually a play that I'm now turning into a novel. But I literally have been writing it for 15 years or so because it involves people who now have passed away. And I actually was almost kind of waiting for that. So I could have the freedom of writing it without having to know that I might be angering somebody or something like that. So because of that, I can kind of understand exactly where he's going with this.
And that's a real issue that writers have to face when you're writing from life or being inspired by life. And there are issues that are near and dear to your hearts that, you feel exposed when you're writing about. You feel naked. Writing is for an audience, and when you're uncovering that much of yourself, it can be really, really nerve-wracking. Because, they're going to see a part of you that is hard for you to see. And it's going to be out there.
I will also say, and this is kind of one of my rules, don't write anything down that you don't want anyone else to read. Mm-hmm. So if you're not comfortable sharing, then that might not be the best thing to write down. No, because you can be exposing stuff you don't want others to see.
Even after you've passed away, or it gets.
It doesn't have to be passing away or
I know,
anything.
But I'm just saying it can come out at some point in time.
Yeah, no, I would
watching.
say that online, but I know, for instance, especially if you'd be okay with it coming out after your death, keeping journals, a whole lot of people put stuff in their journals, and it's very therapeutic to them, but they don't want anyone else to ever read it, so.
Yeah, point
But
blank.
some
If I
people
kept a
might.
journal, I didn't have to kill anybody else who read it.
Well, Emily Dickinson wrote all those poems that we all love.
Mm-hmm.
Her will instructed, I believe it was her sister, to burn everything. So, it's different when you're writing in a journal than it is when you're writing for publication. But writing for publication, I think Brad's rule is sound. And
Yes, I am not talking about journal writing. Feel free to write whatever you want.
But not online, don't keep your journal electronically, just don't.
No, blogs are not meant to be diaries. Okay, number 6.
Number 6. When writing, disconnect from the rest of the world.
But my phone.
No. King
my
advises,
but my
write with the
Twitter.
door closed, rewrite with the door open.
But my internet. Oh.
My Tumblr. No,
This is
go ahead.
update. Oh, right. Oh.
Okay,
my
in all
God.
honesty, go for it, Jen.
That's a nice sentiment. I'm sure that probably is required for a lot of people. Speaking personally, though, writing with the door closed would get me nothing done. I'm not. I wouldn't say that I'm impossible to rein in, but if I have my thing open and I'm working on it, I might get involved in it. But the process of getting involved in what I'm working on requires a lot of brainstorming and mood setting, and I usually have to have voices going somehow. Either I'm listening to a podcast or a book on tape or something, just to get into the zone that I do feel productive. And when I'm sitting at the blank page and I'm like, I don't know what to do next, then it's my inclination to then hop onto the internet and distract myself long enough that I stop worrying about it.
Yeah.
So yes, Mr. King, that's very good advice, and that is how he's written a whole lot of books, and I'm glad that it works for him, but I would have to have the door at least open a crack. I would have to have someone that I could talk to either on the internet or in person to help me through the spots where I stumble, or else I'll fall on my face and probably not get up for a couple days.
Okay, I think the order went boom, 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 boom. So, real fast, I'm going to say I agree with you. Mm-hmm. I have to be in a more chaotic setting. If I am in a closed room with door closed and there's silence, okay, I have to have music or something. If there's complete silence, no, I don't go crazy. I go to sleep.
Oh yeah, that do.
And I get more distracted. It's something to do with my ADHD. Mm-hmm. My parents, when I was growing up, would yell at me, turn off your TV when you're doing your homework. My homework sucked when my TV was off. I had to have a TV on as background noise to stay focused on what I was focused on.
The Iron
That's
Eagle
me.
effect.
Yeah.
But things that you should disconnect from, I'm going to recommend Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, stuff like that. Anything that will pull you away for hours at a time
Oh.
and reduce your productivity. Brad,
We all
the
have what
door-
we need to write. So if you
Yes.
have to light candles and you have to listen to music, you have to do whatever you do. Do that. Personally, I set aside a few hours that I'm not going to jump on Facebook or answer an email. Because, especially answering emails. I mean, they come in, people expect answers right away. It's like, I need, 2 hours, 3 hours set aside where I'm just working. So I do recommend that kind of disconnect. But I can totally understand wanting to check stuff out. I mean, my phone sits next to me, but to be honest, I wouldn't want it elsewhere. I wouldn't want it shut off because as you write, Google is your friend.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. Go ahead, Fedor.
I think for me, picking a time of day, which is before anybody else in the world is even up,
There you go.
is a great time
I like
to
doing
do
it after everybody went to bed.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
me. That's me.
I would just be too tired then, but we're all different, so we all have different methods of getting along. I have good powers of concentration and focus, and I can do almost any kind of work with the most chaotic stuff going on all over the place, but not creative work. That early morning, by myself, all alone, no music, nothing.
And after I go around, let other people go, I'm just going to come back and say, I've got a little quick story to tell you of what convinced me I had to do what you did. Go for it. You're next, and then you.
Oh, well, I think there is a certain necessity to disconnect for certain kinds of writing and for certain people. But I think that the level of what you're disconnecting from and how you're doing that is different for everyone. For me, I don't have the internet open when I'm writing. When I have time that I'm dedicated to doing that, it's distracting to have, people talking to me, my phone going off. I can hyper-focus, I need music going on, and I need everything else to just butt off. Bug off, butt out. There we go. Those are the phrases that I meant. I can write in cafes. I like having some kind of movement around me, but things need to be at a certain tone and the distractions at a certain level to become white noise. If they're not, it is a distraction. And I know, Jen, you said that you are able to have people talking to you, I guess through chat when you're writing, and they
Yeah.
kind of help bolster you when you're flagging.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that is entirely too distracting. All that goes off.
Mm-hmm.
I have a program on my computer called Mac Freedom that will shut off the internet for however long I need. There's one called Antisocial that will shut off social media for as long as I need. And that's how I get things done. I also have ADD. So the level of distraction that other people pose and that the potential of other people pose, I say potential because that is important for me. If my phone sound is on, that means someone could potentially call and reach me. That's a distraction. I don't need anyone to call. Just knowing it's a possibility is a distraction. So the level of disconnect sounds like it's different for all of us. You just need to find what works for you. Don't do so much that it harms your writing, as with Jen if you were off the internet entirely. But don't make yourself so available to the world around you that it does the same thing.
I think the essence of this point that he's making isn't necessarily that you have to do it his way.
Right.
Or, I don't know, I've never met Stephen King. Maybe he does say that you have to do it his way. But I think the point that he's making is you need to identify what would distract you and keep you from writing. Because we've all listed our personal levels of seclusion required to do creative work. I thought of mine while we were talking. It's like I mentioned that I need these things. What actually keeps me from working, I need an excuse to not think about all the other responsibilities I have. So what I turn off is not my social media and not my talking to other people and not my what I consider relaxation stuff. What I have to turn off is don't answer any business emails. Don't check your business email account. Don't look at the list of things you need to do. Don't make appointments. Don't think about appointments. Usually I have to go somewhere. I'm going to Caldi's. I'm going to sit at Caldi's for 3 hours. I'm going to work on my novel. And while I'm at Caldi's, I'm not allowed to work on anything else.
Right.
And that is my version of that point. And everyone else has mentioned their version of that point. So I guess what to take away from it would be you have to know yourself the best. And you have to be willing to shut off that part that is going to unseat your writing.
Totally agree. And between my bill pay work and when I was taking care of that elderly parent, now I'm not first responder anymore. You had to have stuff by you because I was always on call. And that, just knowing that call is going to come in, interrupts. One quick thing, and I'll tell you the quick story, and then we need to jump on the rest. Kathleen, you talked about ways to block. There are free internet software that will block, for a length of time you tell it, certain websites. And you can choose what websites, like Facebook. I'm just choosing that as an example. This was years ago. I was working on a short story. It was a mystery. And I literally had the point of, and the finger was wrapping around the trigger, getting ready to pull. And I was kind of early in my days, so I was being a little overly descriptive. I had this really suspenseful thing. The person I was with at the time was out. Phone rings. I'm thinking it's them. I answer the phone. Hi, would you like to buy? By the time I could finally get off the phone with the telemarketer, which was in less than 5 seconds, mind you, the entire scene was gone. So it does happen. Brad, number 7.
Number 7. Don't be pretentious. On This King says, one of the really bad things you can do to your writing is to dress up the vocabulary, looking for long words because you're maybe a little bit ashamed of your short ones.
You know what? I am going to jump up and down on this one and say yay. Except I have another reason to do it than what he's pointing out. He's right. If you're trying to make yourself sound brainy, and you're not brainy, it's going to come across as you're not brainy. But let's be honest. What is the average American's reading level?
So 7th grade?
7th grade is what I've heard.
Aww.
Now, if you use Microsoft Word, it has this built in. There's also some software out there, but websites you can run it through, and I can't think of them because I use Microsoft Office all the time. But if you check for your Fletch Kincaid, I think is the name of it, reading level, if you're coming up as 11 point whatever or 12 point something or worse, higher number of worse it is, you have narrowed down your audience. Now, don't write down to them as if they're stupid. Yeah, I agreed. But also, too, make sure that you're hitting them at their level. You don't know when they're reading. They could be reading during lunch hour. They could be reading when they came home all exhausted. They don't want to have to suddenly stop reading, open up a thesaurus or a dictionary and go, oh, that's what this word means.
Well, Sharon Shin writes, her superpower as a writer with her writer group of friends was like the dictionary. She was like the dictionary. So if she and her friends were kidnapped by aliens, there's a story behind this. And they had to use superpowers to get out. Her superpower would be spitting out all these insane words that people don't use, but dictionaries do, and confuzzling the aliens, like just confounding them with her vocabulary while her friends made the actual escape plan and get everything set up for her to get out. So, I don't know, I think there's a place for that kind of person, and when you're reading a book and you have to stop to look up a word, and you're me, you're okay with that. I have a dictionary on my phone. I just learn something new and keep going.
The soul of this point is not that you don't use the full of your vocabulary.
Yes.
Right.
My younger sister also has this power, apparently. The power to completely confound her coworkers in average conversation when she brings up a word like immolate. And they're like, what's that? And then she has to explain catching fire.
Uh-huh.
But, the point is, I was just thinking about, I have a little anecdote about this that's very brief. My mother is a sign language interpreter, and she volunteers her time at our church that we attend. And the church sometimes takes songs from whatever places give free songs that you can sing, as worship or whatever. And she has to interpret these songs for the hard of hearing, deaf and hard of hearing people. And she's reading through this song, and I was working at the kitchen table with her, and she would read me a line, and it was something like, Jesus is my hurricane that down into the ocean we go as I am carried. And she looks up and says, what did that mean? Because I can't sign hurricanes and stuff. That doesn't make any sense. I have to sign what it means. And I don't know. And that's when your prose has gotten too purple, when you're just saying things to say things, and you're not actually making a point or communicating really anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it was poetry. I understand. Poetry, you're trying to set a mood or whatever, but when the whole point was that when we're writing, we're trying to communicate an idea, and if your hurricanes and your drowning similes and all that are getting in the way, then perhaps you need to reel those back just a smidge to keep it down. It's like, okay, your love is as strong as a hurricane, and I feel like that is very strong. It's like, okay, it means strong. Got it. Good. Don't need to go on 3 more verses about that with different weather patterns.
Too bad it wasn't drinks. I'm sorry.
I used to be in a critique group with Joanna Slynn, who was a Baptist Jew, and with Judy Marisi, who was Catholic, and I, of course, personally am a heathen. So we had some interesting conversations, as you can imagine, and we often use the words bite me or mea culpa, one way or another. And Judy had one thing that she very much insisted upon, and it was this: it's a sin to make your reader read your sentence twice.
Amen.
Amen.
I like it.
I think that's going to tie up with the next one we go to. Go for it.
I had a friend in college that his parents were always complaining about him reading the Star Trek novelizations. Until he took the SATs and did extremely well in the verbal section. So, so for any of you that haven't read if you watch Star Trek, you notice that sometimes they do use those long words or those words that you might not know except by context. But the novels do too, at least some of them do. And the trick is when you're using a long word, 9 times out of 10 you don't actually have to look it up because you can figure out what it means based on context. Which is very important for science fiction, by the way, because half the time we don't know the word, it's a made-up word to begin with. So it's not actually in the dictionary. But the point is you can use big words in fiction.
Brett?
All right, number 8. Avoid adverbs and long paragraphs, as King emphasizes in his books. The adverb is not your friend. The road to hell is paved with adverbs. I love that one.
He should have been in our critique.
Paragraphs are almost always as important for how they look as for what they say. And I would totally agree with this.
And
White space.
I love white space.
Dialogue.
I'm going to turn this over to Kathleen next, but I'm going to quickly say this. You said, Fedora, that one of your critique partners said there's a sin to make your reader
read a sentence
twice. That I always find myself rereading and rereading during the long paragraphs and the long sentences.
Well, that would be true, too. Yeah. It would be an even worse sin, maybe, to have to read several sentences.
Don't lose your audience to the point that they don't know where they are anymore.
If by the end of the paragraph I forgot what happened in the beginning of the paragraph, that's a problem.
Something's too long.
Oh, I was going to say that adverbs, he says adverbs are worse after he said and she said.
Yes.
Those phrases are best left unadorned. So
he said jokingly.
You see, seriously?
It does sound
I
awful.
I had
it sounds bad.
Is it so bad?
Say,
she said, questioningly.
That's the difference between showing and telling.
well, they showed and told, so it's just
well, you don't
need
need the telling if you're doing the showing.
Well, I agree. Adverbs do tend to be overused. I'm not as anti-adverbs as King is, and I don't think most writers are as anti-adverb as King is.
I try my hardest to be.
I cut out as many as I can, and that's usually all of them.
But, instead of he said jokingly, you can say he joked. So there are ways to do it.
Exactly.
Much better.
Yeah, I'm not an enemy of adverbs. I think there's a place for them. It's just a very small place.
In the corner, beaten
sprinkled, not dumped.
To boldly go where no one has gone before. That has an adverb in there somewhere.
Boldly is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think long paragraphs can also be okay. It just depends on what you're writing, and context is key for all of this.
Yes.
Maybe.
But I'm like Brett. If I've got to go back to the beginning and reread the paragraph to figure out what you were saying by the end of the paragraph, there's a problem.
I love Victorian novels, and Victorian novels are I mean, they will have pages of the same paragraph.
Same sentence.
Exactly. So, I'm used to this, and I totally, I don't hate them as much as I'm kind of going on here, but the reality is that they are bad, and if you cut it up, and then the eye can follow it a lot better, if the mind can grasp concepts more easily, and to be honest, usually they involve run-ons.
Can I just say, you said Victorian novels,
Yes.
long paragraphs, long sentences. I would just like to point out that our attention spans have gotten shorter. We have the internet now. If stuff does not have all the white space between it or is not numbered bulleted points, we have no time for it. I think the style of reading and what readers are able to comprehend and the time it takes them, the time they're willing to put in to comprehend something have shortened drastically. So I think for our time now, these rules apply, but they were not always necessary. Like, Roman senators could memorize, like, pages and pages and pages and pages long speeches, and they could...
And there's no television.
Yeah.
No, and they're, like, they could begin a sentence, do a whole crap ton of words between, like, the end of the sentence, which would go back to the subject, so that it would paint literally like a picture. If you mapped out all the words, it would paint a picture of what they were talking about, not just, speak a picture. That was how they rolled.
Yeah.
That's
exactly why a
rolled.
Victorian novel looks the way it does, is because there was no TV, so there was no common image that we could all say, this is a tree, this is a rock, this is this. You had to describe what that tree looked like. You had to describe what that rock looked like. There's a reason why Hawthorne spends pages telling you what the sky looks like.
Exactly. Like, we have books where, like, all these spies go to India or go to, Africa or go to China, and if this were, like, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, you'd need to describe everything they saw.
Exactly.
Now you can be like, oh, I'm going to Google that. Oh, that's where they are. I see. So
I watched a spy movie the other day where they went to China. I have a frame of reference for what that architecture looks like. Where the people reading in the Victorian times would never ever go to China, and they would probably feel lucky if they ran into someone who had.
And if they read that book that you were reading, they would probably be mystified. What does it look like? I can't see anything.
Or they would
Marco
picture it
Polo.
as the English countryside.
Yeah.
This is why
So-
Marco Polo was the biggest hit of, the 1500s or
Something like that, yeah.
So yes, these rules are good for now, but just recognize that there is a reason for the rules as they are now. I think, it's helpful.
In 100 years, we'll all just be getting it beamed straight into our head or something like that.
Or living as a hollow novel. Go ahead.
Well, as far as I know, William Faulkner still has the longest single paragraph in the English language, which runs to about 50 pages. It's very long.
So
But-
Pam, I remember
Yes.
the thing.
But-
I didn't remember who.
The point of that is that his ramblings were the ramblings of a crazy person, and that is pretty much what we expect from paragraphs that are extremely long these days.
I like it.
That's true.
All right, number 9. Don't get overly caught up in grammar. According to King, language does not always have to wear a tie and lace up shoes. The object of fiction isn't grammatical correctness, but to make the reader welcome and tell a story.
Amen to that.
Does this apply only to dialogue?
No.
No.
She asked,
Eh.
pleadingly.
No, there are lots of sentence fragments, for example, in most modern writers. And I think I almost defy you to tell a very exciting chase scene that uses full sentences
Yes.
every single
No.
time.
I have a
Can
problem
you do
with...
it, Brad? I don't think I
there's
could.
no way. In fact, I don't like getting yelled at for sentence fragments because it's like, that's called
gotta.
action.
It's how you do pacing.
Yeah.
Real quick, I'm going to say, a little while ago I talked about deprogramming. This is a deprogramming I had to do with myself on this. When I wrote my thesis for my master's degree, I learned business writing and writing for fiction are two completely different animals, different species. And I found when I came back to fiction writing, I had to be able to go back and say, it is a fragment. So what? Moving on.
Yeah, actually, there's all kinds of different writing.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
you've got political writing, which is an entirely different, world to itself. You have business writing. You have lawyer speak. You have,
Educational writing.
Exactly.
As yours truly used to do.
Comedy writing.
Comedy writing, all of this stuff. It's a thing. There is, each form of writing, I guess, has its own language and shortcuts and other things like that you kind of need to know if you're going to write that, and more importantly, you have to get out of when you're going to write fiction.
Something that's not published, but I keep saying that someday I will come back to it. But I wrote a fictional political speech that was in a fictional story. And it sounds like a real political speech. And no, I did not I did put a large amount of the speech in there, but it's not in a block. Because that would be boring in a fiction story.
Yes, it would be.
I did little snippets broken up with the point of view of people doing other things or thoughts in their head or whatever. Because I was literally combining two different styles of writing. And you have to get creative if you're trying to do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
So.
Number 10.
Oh,
Sorry, my bad.
The overly caught up in grammar, I wanted to point out books like Train Spotting and I believe Sapphire's Push, but I haven't read it, so don't quote me. Those books are written, I believe, in dialect. Like, I know Train Spotting is. Don't quote me on the Sapphire book that the Precious movie was based off of. But Train Spotting, like, the spellings and the grammar are all after the main character's nationality, like, and his particular social class and, status of life. And you hear the words in your head in the way that he would say them, so you kind of get into the rhythm of how he thinks and how he speaks, whether he's speaking or not. And that's part of how the book's atmosphere is, created, and the tone. So, if the book had been written all in, like, proper grammar, it would have had a completely different tone and a completely different voice for the main character. And it would have been all wrong. All wrong.
Yeah, very
true.
So,
stay true to what the story wants from you, how it needs to be written. Don't worry about grammar if it's going to impede the story you're trying to tell.
You can go too far with that. It's difficult. It's easy to mess that up. Let's put it that way.
You can, but if the story does not require proper grammar in some spots, always defer to the story it knows.
Yeah.
And dialogue very rarely has proper grammar. I don't know anybody who speaks in proper grammar, unless they're an English teacher. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going
not
to
what you say.
agree with Melanie largely that one has to be very careful with using such things because, once again, we can get to that sin of having to read those sentences over and over again, and people still don't understand what they are. So you have to use it, I think, very judiciously, and to have other people read it to say, huh, or to say, yeah, I get it.
All
Number
right.
10.
Wait,
Now on
does
to
that
number
mean
10.
I can call out the sound and the fury? Can I?
Well, they're crazy too, you gotta admit.
He was simple.
It's simple,
Different.
yes.
Number 10.
All right. Master the art of description. Ooh. Description begins in the writer's imagination, but should finish in the reader's. Writes King. Sorry. In a way that will cause your reader to prickle with recognition.
Ew.
In many ways, cases
Yeah.
when a reader puts a story aside because it's got boring, the boredom arose because a writer grew enchanted with his powers of description and lost sight of the priority, which is keep the ball rolling.
Character.
I would like to, this is one of the particulars that I remember from the book. King said, if he was having a character walk into a bar, he would have the character notice, like, 3 or 4 things. I heard that, David. 3 or 4 things that character would notice right off the bat. So it's a very character-based method of description. So, a character that's, a singer, like, who sings at the bar would notice different things right off the bat than, say, a bartender would. Who would notice different things than a businessman, who would notice different things than a cop or a hooker. So,
Criminal.
yeah, so
Yes.
they're all going to notice different things, and you want just 3 or 4 things that will set the scene, and that's as much as he would need to do. Like, little things could be brought up later, but just those 3 or 4 details was all that was needed right off the bat.
To go
Yeah.
to Brad next, but to borrow from Irma Bombeck as an example, she wrote, you take a man and a woman to an art museum. A woman sees 11 paintings on the wall. The man sees 11 nails holding up paintings. Go for it.
Well, I was going to say that that's actually really important, and what I was going to bring up is knowing how much description really to put into any given scene. You know, and we were talking about the Victorians. They would literally describe an entirety of a room, and everything within the room, and everything that the person was wearing, and then how that suit had been made by the tailor, and, you know, just all of this rich detail that, to be perfectly honest, told you nothing about the scene you were trying to read, which is a guy walking into a room. So I love putting in, like, the 3 or 4 things that you might see if you walk into a room, and I agree completely that they are going to change depending upon who walks into that room. But then out of that, to describe only what is most important, and then let the reader fill in. You know, there's no need to describe what everyone is wearing on every little piece of their body, because, to be honest, boots are boots, and let the reader, if they want to have laced boots or just work boots or whatever kind of boots they want. You know, there's nothing wrong with kind of letting the reader build their own, you know, image.
Right. Go ahead.
Fred, you're making me crazy talking about the Victorians like that all the time.
What? I love the
Wait
Victorians.
a minute. Charles Dickens was a Victorian.
Yes.
And he is famous for his economical descriptions.
Yes.
And I took a lesson from him, or at least I tried to, of having him describe he would describe a character in 1-2 sentences at the most, their physical description, and then he would give some kind of simile or some other representation of the character's inner working so that you could identify that person as a soul, whether a soulmate or somebody you hated or whoever. But I thought, wow, that is so good. And I certainly try to do the same thing. And it was economical.
Yes, no, it is. And I will totally give you that, and I would also give you... who is it? Jumping over to the other side is Dumas and Hawthorne and Melville and all those guys. Stoker, Bram Stoker.
Yeah.
Nice short dialogue.
Well,
descriptions.
he's
I
a
love
theater
it.
guy. That's why he is.
Yeah. But so I'll totally give you, there are Victorians who did not, but there are too many who did. Calling Hawthorne out.
Jane Eyre. Sorry, go ahead.
There was, I think it was a script writing class course I was in, or a lecture or something, in which the teacher recommended that instead of trying to teach us to show not tell, instead of saying she had a chaotic personality, instead describe her kitchen and make it in a state of chaos. I'm gonna go ahead and say stop doing that. Because since then I've seen that done in so many places, you know, in everything that was written for that class I was in, and others, you know, manuscripts I've read from people I know sometimes, manuscripts that I'm working from in work, stuff I see published in actual books. Is like you describe the room, and we're supposed to draw a conclusion about the character in the room from the room.
Only if the character is very important. I think you're talking there about what's important to describe at all, as opposed to just something that you kind of toss off.
Well, Ethan Frome does that a lot too. The novella Ethan Frome, it's not so much the room, but all the background is supposed to describe the characters themselves and what's going on.
I think that's true to a point. Like, if someone walked into my bedroom and then walked into my brother's bedroom, they would not think we were related. And that's cool. It's because our how we situate our surroundings, if we're able to, you know, if we're allowed to do that, if we're able to, does speak about who we are. It should not be used in place of a good description, though, of a character. Because if you look at me at work, I'm extremely organized. And if you look at my room, you think it's a mess, but I know where everything is. So it depends on the character, a lot of it. And I do think writing description is an art. It takes practice. It can be hard. But you don't have to do all of it. I think readers want to be engaged in a story and want to help create the scenes that they're reading. That's why, you know, my main character for book X looks a little different from someone else's, you know, mental image of character from book X. You know, it's because the reader is, you know, invited to help create what's going on. And, you know, it's cool.
That's where the book takes place, in the reader's head.
Exactly.
It's not really on your pages at all.
It's why when there's a movie adaptation of a book, you know half the audience is going to be angry by whoever is cast because they look wrong. That's not who this character is.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time. Or I would share with you an author's experiment that they did with a reading group about a character in a mustache. Go ahead, the next one. And actually, to the audience, this is going to be the last one for this hour. Next hour, we'll continue. Next week, we'll continue on with the same topic. So go ahead, Brad.
All right, number 11. One I believe in. Don't give too much background information. What you need to remember is that there's a difference between lecturing about what you know and using it to enrich the story. The latter is good, the former is not.
In other words, no info dump couch.
Yes. Research
no
belongs as far in the background and the backstory as you can get it.
Now, it's kind of a little interesting. We're going to talk about this on another episode coming up eventually. Is IO9 was talking about 10 writing rules they wish that authors would quit paying attention to. And one of those is a prologue, and which can sort of be what we're talking about here with the background dump. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say is, yes, there is a time for description and background history of what's going on. You have to put it in there. However, and I'm going to throw another Victorian writer under the bus for this one.
You have to understand, Fedora's having a broken heart here. She's almost in tears.
And when Brad said that, he looked right at her.
Yes, I did. All right, so Alexander Dumas, one of my favorite authors of all time.
Love him.
He's awesome.
Okay, when he describes D'Artagnan's first ride into Paris, he describes not only where the horse came from that he's riding on, not only the entirety of what Paris looks like and what D'Artagnan is wearing, but then goes into a whole long thing about D'Artagnan and his dad having a whole conversation about the suit he's wearing, the horse he's riding, and the sword he's carrying. All of which happens within the same paragraph and page of him riding into the city. It's kind of his thoughts as he comes in. I love it to death, and I've loved it forever, but at the same time, I really just wanted to know where D'Artagnan was going. That was kind of the cool part. And it would have been nice if we'd started maybe with his dad, or had, some sort of flashback maybe.
Which a lot of movies have taken on.
Yes, but not just pure stream of consciousness thought,
Well,
which you got to love about Dumas.
one of the things from back then, and there was a play made of Three Musketeers that I saw that fits this so perfectly. Alexandre Dumas was actually a character in the play. And you got to see things that were inspiring him as he wrote. Like the horses the Musketeers were riding on were actually carousel horses. But hold that thought for a second. I'll explain this in a minute. Victorian writers were doing a couple of things back then. A, they were travel books. They were travel writers.
They were.
Because people didn't get to leave their county too often. Number two...
Number 2.
A, B, whatever.
Sorry.
Mea culpa, bite me, I don't care.
All of the above.
All of the above. Anyway, what I was going to say is, while this still is true technically in the short story world, more than poetry world, or more than in the novel world, they got paid by the word.
Yes.
And there was a scene in the play which I was talking about. If you remember the book, or if you've watched the movies, any of the movies, there's a scene where the Musketeers go up at a siege of a Huguenot town, and they're sitting on this ruins.
They rush out.
Yeah, and the Huguenots come rushing out as they're eating this picnic. In the play, all the Musketeers get killed. And Dumas comes walking on stage going, "No! I've got another 100,000 words to write!" And he walks off, and the Musketeers get up, and one of, I think it was Arthos, turns to Parthos and says, "I don't know about you, but I think I died rather well." But the whole thing is, he was stretching it on because he was getting paid for it.
Also, people wanted their entertainment stretched out.
yeah.
They
Yes.
didn't have much.
No.
And this audience, you've got to remember also, was a literate audience, whereas most of the common people weren't. And so this was only for an elite crew.
Yes.
I
Remember that too.
Bringing it back to modern day, there was a scene from a book I read recently that did it very well. They actually had an internet video They played an internet video to get in some of the backstory they needed to get in.
Okay,
Yes.
we can't rush it here at the end, but tune in next week for part 2 of the 22 lessons of Stephen King's On Writing. Thank you for listening. Join us next week and have a great week writing. The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her. Right Pack Radio would like to thank STL Books for allowing us to record in their office. STL Books is a online bookstore specializing in new and used high-quality literature, children's books, and books written by or about St. Louis. Please visit them online at www.stlbooks.com or find their store on the Amazon.com website.